I want to thank all of you for being with us here today, representing the service members who were murdered in a terrorist attack. You also represent the Gold Star families, all of them, through the Afghan conflict. Behind me are the photos of the 13 U.S. service members who were murdered in a terrorist attack on August 26, 2021 at the airport in Kabul. Their names are Marine Corps Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Marine Corps Sergeant Nicole G., Marine Corps Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Knaus, Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley J. McCaul, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Kareem Nikoui, Marine Corps Corporal Dagan Page, Marine Corps Sergeant Jahani Rosario Picardo, Marine Corps Corporal Humberto A. Sanchez, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, and Navy Petty Officer 3rd Class Maxton Sobiak. Before we start, I'd like to take a pause for a moment of silence in remembrance of them. Thank you. These men and women were Marines, soldiers, and sailors. They were Americans. They were patriots. They were heroes. But to you, they were more than that. They were your sons, your daughters, your hearts. And they were ripped away from you in an act of violence halfway around the world. As a father of 5, I cannot begin to imagine your pain and suffering. Yet 2 years later, we are still here seeking answers. How did this happen? What went wrong? Why couldn't this tragedy have been prevented? These questions remain unanswered because this administration wants to sweep what happened under the rug. They know they bear the brunt of the blame, and they want to escape any accountability. Well, I will not let that happen. For months, the president's own generals and intelligence community warned that withdrawing all U.S. troops would result in a catastrophe. Our NATO allies begged the president to reconsider. When he refused to relent, both Republicans and Democrats in Congress urged the president to prepare for this ill-advised, unconditional withdrawal from Afghanistan. This was a disgraceful surrender to the Taliban. Through my investigation, we've learned that President Biden's own State Department and Department of Defense warned of increased violence that threatened the safety of our embassy and American citizens. In February 2021, before the president announced his decision to unconditionally withdraw all troops, the regional security officer at the embassy warned that there was a, quote, clear sign that violence in Kabul has risen sharply over the last 45 days. In May of 2021, DoD began planning for a non-combatant evacuation operation, also known as a NEO, stating that conditions in Afghanistan were rapidly approaching the point of triggering the NEO execution. But the State Department, the lead federal agency for a NEO, failed to request one from the Department of Defense. And they only did so after the fall of Kabul. There's an old adage, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This was the utmost failure. And on June 14, 2021, the embassy's regional security officer again warned of an increase in violence, noting that there was 325% increase in attacks from the same time in the previous year, largely due to the unprecedented Taliban attacks in the country. Yet President Biden ignored all of it. And as a result, the world watched the horrors unfold at the Kabul airport. People falling from airplanes, Innocent women and children being beaten and killed by the Taliban attempting to escape to freedom. And your sons and daughter witnessed this. And then the unthinkable happened, a bombing at Abbey, killing 13 U.S. service members and injuring 45 more. Before this committee, Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, who is here today, and Tyler, we want to thank you for being here, testified that Marine snipers at Abbey spotted the suicide bomber before the explosion, yet they were told by their superiors that they could not engage the threat, were not given permission to engage. The terrorist responsible for this horrific attack was released by the Taliban from a prison at Bagram Air Base, which the Biden administration abandoned. And in fact, thanks to the investigative work of Jerry Dunleavy and James Hassan, we learned the Biden administration asked the Taliban to raid an ISIS-K location near the airport ahead of the bombing that was believed to be a staging ground for an imminent attack on the airport. Not surprisingly, the Taliban did not agree. We also know that the U.S. military officials sought to strike an ISIS-K cell in Afghanistan 2 days before the Abbey attack, and U.S. intelligence even predicted the exact day and time of the bombing at Abbey. Yet, too, that request for an airstrike was denied by our U.S. military. In a massive slap in the face to every person who served in Afghanistan, the Biden administration viewed the Taliban as suddenly our security allies during this evacuation. I've heard from many of you, your sons, Taliban was the enemy, and then they had to work side by side with the enemy. This tragedy was a self-inflicted wound that not only killed 13 U.S. service members, but also killed 170 innocent civilians and injured 45 people in a massive suicide bombing attack. Simply put, it was hell on earth. And the saddest part is, it all could have been prevented. All I can do is offer you my promise. I will not relent in this investigation. I will fight with every fiber of my being and leave no stone unturned until we have the full truth as to how the hell this happened. This Thursday, this committee will be interviewing Ambassador Dan Smith, who led the State Department's Afghanistan after-action review and is a key witness in our investigation. And in the coming months or weeks, after months of effort, we will finally be interviewing the commanding officer, the Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whitehead. And I intend to personally be there for that interview. I will hold those responsible for this catastrophic event. I will hold them accountable, and I will get answers. You all, the Gold Star families, and our veterans deserve no less, and you deserve the truth. And this committee will deliver. As I stated, we have with us here today Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews and Army Specialist Aidan Gunderson, who both testified before this committee in March. And we want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice and your courage to come before Congress and tell the American people and these families the truth about what happened. I'd also like to recognize all the Afghan veterans who are here with us today. And for those veterans who are watching this, for those watching this here today, I have a message for you. Your service was not in vain. It is because of your heroism that we never witnessed a large-scale attack by the terrorists since 9/11 in the last 20 years. We will never forget, and we will never, ever allow this to ever happen again. With that, I'd like to recognize the ranking member, the Democrat, Ms. Madeleine Dean.
May I borrow yours? I thank you, Chairman McCaul. I'm honored to be here with all of you today. To the Afghanistan Gold Star families, both here in the room and those who are at home, many of whom are in my own district, Pennsylvania's 4th Congressional District, suburban Philadelphia, I offer my humble words of thanks for your sacrifice, your courage, and your service to our country, alongside your sons and daughters, family members. I am so incredibly sorry for this crushing set of losses. To these heroes, the loss of your sons, daughters, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, and so many other loved relationships. Over the course of the 20-year war in Afghanistan, 2,461 U.S. service members were killed, including 93 from my own home state of Pennsylvania. I have had the privilege over the years to meet many Gold Star families, and I am continually in awe of your courage, your strength, your devotion to your lost family member, but also your devotion to our country. I'm in awe of your strength. What happened at Abbey Gate 2 years ago was devastating, obviously to you, but to our country. I think you know that. In your own grief, in your own pain that is unimaginable to me, a mother to 3, a grandmother to 4, know that our country lost in a crushing way alongside each of you, even as we cannot fully comprehend the heartbreak that you have suffered and you will continue to suffer. I humbly acknowledge and thank the more than 800,000 men and women who served in Afghanistan over the course of 20 years. The weight of these deployments placed so much on families and on loved ones. 20,744 U.S. service members were wounded, and many, many others suffer from the lingering, often invisible wounds of war, including PTSD. Marine Corps Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, what an honor it is to be with you yet again. Thank you for coming before this committee and explaining so much to us, because we do have an obligation to learn what happened from your family members, from the service members who were there. And Specialist Aidan Gunderson, thank you also for your service to us, this Congress, but obviously, much more importantly, to our country. You know that your family member's service was not in vain, as the chairman has said. To all of the service members, men and women who served, you prevented another 9/11. It's an extraordinary feat over many, many people, over many, many years, over a tremendous amount of sacrifice and suffering. In those final days, your loved ones ensured that more than 100,000 people were evacuated to safety, even as they did not get to enjoy that same thing. Marine Corps Lance David Espinoza, Marine Corps Sergeant Nicole Gee, Marine Corps Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christopher Knaus, Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley McCullum, Marine Corps Dylan Merola, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Kareem Nikui, Marine Corps Corporal Dagan Page, Marine Corps Sergeant Jahani Rosario Pichardo, Marine Corps Corporal Umberto Bert Sanchez, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Navy Petty Officer 3rd Class Maxton Soviak. Their names will not be forgotten. I wanted to be sure I said their names as well, so that they are forever on the hearts and minds of everyone in this country who should never forget the sacrifice and the service that they offered to this country at the end of a 20-year war. What a heartbreaking horror. We are forever indebted to you. This 20-year war cost us so much, yet we could not continue to send Americans to fight a war no longer in the nation's vital interest, and your family members knew that. We could not continue to risk the lives of our young men and women. It is a fact that the end was devastatingly heartbreaking. A tragic terrorist bomb tearing away so many civilians there, as well as our service members, your loved ones. Still, it was necessary to bring this war to a close. We know that it was a series of decisions over multiple administrations that brought this war to an end, a very tragic end. As Secretary Austin testified to Congress, quote, "Extending beyond the end of August would have greatly imperiled our people and our mission. The Taliban made clear that their cooperation would end on the 1st of September. Staying longer than we did would have made it even more dangerous for our people and would not have significantly changed the number of evacuees to get out." In the end, it was a series of decisions made and executed over multiple administrations. But we are here today to honor you, to learn from you, from your service, your sacrifice, and your grievous losses, so that we in Congress will only do better in the future for those who serve us. May God protect and continue to watch over you and your families and all of the troops of the United States of America. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. I want to thank you for being here today to make this a bipartisan event, as it should be. This is an American issue, not a Republican or Democrat issue, and I just want to thank you for being here. With that, I'd like to recognize the chair of the Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee, an Afghanistan veteran himself who sacrificed greatly the loss of his 2 limbs, Mr. Brian Mast.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a debt that can't be repaid. Literally nothing. Nothing can repay it. Their names have been said. I will say their names again because it's the only way that our fallen live on. It's the only way, is that we remember them. We remember their smiles. Remember the ways that we could get under their skin, the ways that we could make them happy, the things that would bug them, the things that they did. That's how people live on, is by remembering their stories, what they did, what made them great, what they wanted the world to know, and how they wanted the world to be better, and how they participated in that. Marine Sergeant McCaul G., killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover, killed in action August 26, 2021. Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Knaus, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Corporal Hunter Lopez, killed in action August 26, 2021. Lance Corporal Dylan R. Marola, killed in action August 26, 2021. Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Corporal Dagan Page, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Corporal Humberto Bert Sanchez, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Lance Corporal Jared M. Schmitz, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Lance Corporal David L. Espinoza, killed in action August 26, 2021. Marine Sergeant Johanny Rosario Picardo, killed in action August 26, 2021. Navy Corpsman 3rd Class Maxton W. Soviak, killed in action August 26, 2021. It's not easy to say the names of those that we remember. Sometimes a song or a smell or a restaurant or something can make us think of those that we lost. But as I said before, it's important to say their names. Our president will not say their names. He hasn't said their names out loud. We will continue to do so that we never forget the sacrifices that were made that, as I said, can never be repaid. I thank you, Chairman, for convening today's roundtable. I will tell you personally, I cannot, and I pray that I never have to try and understand that very visceral daily heartache of losing a son or a daughter. I have 4 children. I know the anger and the hatred and the heartbreak of losing brothers. I've lost many in arms. And when I think about it, I know that I can recite their names and the dates that they were killed. And I remember the moments that took them, whether it was sniper fire or a tripwire attached to an IED or the spray of an AK-47. I lived through it often in my own mind, in my own memories. I know what they were saying in their final moments. They were the most capable operators. They were skilled, they were serious, they were deliberate in every action that they were taking when they were executing their missions, just like your sons and your daughters. They would do anything for our country. They took pride in it. I also know that when one of ours fell, we would scrutinize every detail of what took place, how they fell, how do we do it better next mission, how do we adjust our tactics, what did we miss, was it just some kind of bad luck of war? August 26, 2021 was not bad luck of war that took your sons and daughters. It was indifference by Joe Biden. He did something that I thank God I never experienced during my time in combat. He sought to execute a political operation to win political points instead of a military operation to win a fight. It's why he chose September 11 as a withdraw date. It's why he sent our fighters home and left the diplomats in place as Afghanistan was crumbling, only to have to bring them back. Bring back your sons and daughters and thousands more because of his foolishness. I said that he sought to execute. I did not say that he planned a military operation, because we know for a fact that there was a failing to apply any common sense to any level of planning that you could say took place. They operated on a mentality to count on the best possible circumstances, not calculate for the worst case scenario at all. Anybody that's spent a day in the military knows that is not how we operate. He refused to acknowledge the warnings given by his own people on the ground. Dozens of his State Department employees warned of what was happening in a descent cable. He did not read it, and to my knowledge, he has not read it to this day. He used our military as pawns for politics. He dishonored their duty to America. And he decided when he did that, that they were as expendable as the equipment that he left behind. I've spoken to many of you prior, and I know what you have expressed to me that you hope for, that something be learned, that their friends that are still in uniform not suffer the same fate because of foolishness, because of an unwillingness to reflect on how to do things better and what went wrong. We will make sure that that foolishness never happens again, that your sons and daughters are remembered, and that what they fought for is what this country will always be. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, Brian. That was very powerful. Before I turn to the families, I want to read a statement that I just received from General Milley. Apparently, the Pentagon and State Department are watching. He says, quote, "We owe Gold Star families everything, We owe them transparency. We owe them honesty. We owe them accountability. We owe them the truth about what happened to their loved ones. I trust the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps did the best they could in briefing the families who had loved ones killed at Abbey. I believe the briefers gave every piece of information that they could. If there were issues with that, we need to take whatever corrective action is necessary, and our hearts go out to those families. He says, this is a personal thing for all of us in uniform. We don't like what happened in Afghanistan. We don't like the outcome of Afghanistan. We owe it to the families to take care of them. And he says, we owe it to them because their sacrifices were not in vain. For our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, CIA officers, Department of State officers, anyone who served in Afghanistan over 20 plus years, the cost in blood was high, but every single one of us who served in Afghanistan should hold our heads high. Each served with skill, dedication, and honor. For 2 decades, our nation was not attacked from Afghanistan, and that was our mission, and each one can be rightly proud of their service. General Milley. I thank the General for that comment. I know he cares deeply about this, but now we want to turn to the families to hear your stories about what happened to your children. And we will go in alphabetical order. And first, we will start with the family of Nicole G. And Miss Christy Shamblin will give remarks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christy Shamblin, and I'm Sergeant Nicole Leanne G's mom-in-law. Nicole's mom, Becky, is sitting with her in heaven, or she would be here today to tell you about her daughter. Nicole was a proud female Marine. She and countless others like her put on a uniform every day to protect and defend our freedoms. They gave up their own freedoms to ensure a safer, better, more freedom-filled life for the rest of us and our allies. Nicole and the other heroes who evacuated over 120,000 allies did not have any part in starting this war, but they gave their very last breath to see it to the end. Nicole spoke about how very proud she was to be rescuing vulnerable and fearful people. I vividly remember her telling me, these mothers are throwing their babies over razor wire because they know we will keep them alive. Those men and women in uniforms loved their jobs, and they carried out this humanitarian evacuation in the worst of circumstances. Those victories belong to our troops and the people in uniforms. While those victories belong to the troops, there were failures, and I can count over 6 opportunities to stop this tragic ending. Systems we have in place were ignored. Descent cables signed by an unprecedented 23 members or people. Our armed services request for air support. Multiple military personnel saying this is not a good idea. Our snipers asking for permission to engage. Every one of them ignored. These are red flags. Why were they ignored? Please help us answer those questions so we can create positive change. The United States of America will again be called on to evacuate and to rescue vulnerable groups of people. Please help us make positive changes so that we don't have to watch another parent walk through the hell that we are walking through. I like to always tell a story about Nicole. It makes me feel better. So I'm going to end with a story about her. She was a powerhouse. She was physically in the best shape I've ever known a female, 5'1" female to be in. We went hiking with her 5 years before her murder, our family, and my youngest son was about 6 years old at the time. And after we hiked in about 2 miles, he was voicing his discomfort in hiking back. And so McCaul cheerfully piggybacked him back 2 miles, leading the group, always encouraging us to keep going and to stay hydrated. She was always encouraging, and I'd like to encourage you guys to help us finish this. Make sure another family doesn't have to join us. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to what we can accomplish together.
Thank you, Christy. I know. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. I know McCaul will be so proud. Next, we have the family of Taylor Hoover, Darren Hoover, and Kelly Barnett.
First of all, I'd like to thank Chairman McCaul, Ranking Member Dean for being here, and all the rest of this committee. We want answers, we need answers, and we expect those answers. I'm calling on you, please, please, don't let this fall through the cracks. You haven't thus far and have made us proud. Please continue it. I'm not going to talk a lot, but I am going to breathe a little bit of fire. I want to know why this current administration isn't able to take responsibility for their actions in the days, the weeks, and the months leading up to this fateful day. Not a single thing was set in stone since the withdrawal date had been pushed back. If this timetable had been pushed back a couple of months, why was the evacuation time so truncated and on a specific timeline? On or about August 18, 2021, General Milley stated this: "There was nothing that I or anyone else saw that indicated a collapse of the Afghan army or this government in 11 days. How is that not possible? Secretary Austin stated, "We'll evacuate all Americans that we can, at least until the clock runs out or our capabilities are overextended." What in the world does that mean? What does that mean? Before the clock runs out? Were there not contingency plans upon contingency plans upon contingency plans executed, made ready in case one plan fell through and another one had to be taken into place? As Chairman McCaul said, failure to plan is planning to fail. I've talked a couple of times with some special operators from in theater that were there at the time and leading up to that fateful day. They tell the story a little bit differently. There was a plan set in place before the previous administration had left. It was not planned by suits. It was planned by boots. And they were training for it, and training for it. They had it down. They had the contingency plans set in place. This administration walks in and blows it to kingdom come. Ignorance? To me, it is. Complete ignorance. 11 days. That's how long it took for Kabul to fall. The country, the government. Bagram Air Base was abandoned under orders of this administration on July 1st, several weeks prior to the date our kids were taken from us. Not in 11 days, in several weeks leading up to that. Then he gave up Kabul, our citizens, and our allies, to include the interpreters that were there with our men and women in uniform. To me, I asked the question, did the right hand know what the left hand was doing? Sure doesn't seem that way. Was it State Department running the show? Was it the Department of Defense? Or was it the suits in the administration? Was General Miller not doing the bidding of the DOD, the State Department, or administration, and was replaced by General Donahue on the ground? Again, why are the boots not being listened to? They were living and breathing the chaos and hell that was on the ground every single day. Why did we, the United States military, ask the Taliban to take out that cell in a hotel down the street? That's not their responsibility. They were our enemy. ISIS-K was our enemy. We spent 20 years fighting. Why was it denied a drone strike, a precision drone strike, to take those individuals out? We bombed a family. We drone striked a family afterwards, took out just that family. You're telling me that we couldn't have precision dropped on those ISIS-K members? This was all actionable intel that we sat on. Nothing was done. Why? Why? How is that going to change in the future? Was it done on purpose? I don't know. I want that answered too. Intel had been tracking the individual, the bomber, what he looked like, what he was wearing, down to the computer bag, the black computer bag, laptop bag, with white writing on it. Does that not stand out? And we can't do anything about it? Our snipers can't do anything about it when they see him? Are we more worried about pissing off the Taliban? Why is that a bad thing? Then we move to 2 weeks ago. We have Biden shouting in a press conference, name me one single objective that we set out to accomplish that we failed on. Name me one. In all of our history, not one. I say to you, Mr. President, you got 13 pictures that we have all named. You got 13 that you did not accomplish. I know he can't name one of them without a card sitting in front of him or a teleprompter sitting in front of him. I say to him, resign. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Secretary Blinken, Secretary Lloyd, General Milley, you need to resign. We haven't gotten every piece of information. It's being withheld. Now I move to Lieutenant Colonel Whitehead. You can't possibly think that you have any respect from those that you command any longer with the actions that you failed to take or that you did take. Captain Ball, now Major Ball, is a disgrace to the uniform, staying in his hotel while his guys were out on the line. Then when he did show up, chaos ensued even more. He moved his Marines to a compacted area in front of the gate. They should have been spread out instead of clustered together. That's when Echo Company came out to relieve Gulf or Ghost Company. They had to fight to regain some semblance of order. After doing this for several days, the Afghans started to notice that when the black shirts came out, they had to behave. But when the green shirts came out, the Afghans created the chaos again and crowded the gate. In closing, I want General Milley's stars. I want Colonel Whitehead's birds. I want Major Ball's oak clusters in my hand now. You can no longer lead. None of you have the respect of your men and women anymore. Do what is right. It's past time. Today is the date 2 years ago that we received our kids home at Dover. 2 years ago today, where we were disrespected with stories of Biden's son and him looking at his watch. And today, here we sit as their families, begging you, 2 years later, find these answers. Our veterans deserve it. The 22 a day cannot continue to happen because of these failures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren. And Kelly, did you have any remarks? Let me just also say that General Milley, I talked to him recently, and finally, the Pentagon has said they will fully cooperate with this investigation. I also want to thank Fox News for reporting the statement that was recently transmitted to me that I just read to you from General Milley. I hope they will keep their promise, and it would be nice to hear from Secretary Blinken as well to provide full cooperation to this committee to get to the bottom of the questions, to the answers that you deserve, sir. Thank you. Kelly?
Thank you. Just wanted to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for letting us have a voice, and thank you for going on this journey with us. I am Staff Sergeant Hoover's mom, Taylor's mom, an amazing creature.
Kelly, you're very quiet.
Oh.
Could you pull it a little closer, please? Thank you.
Is that better? Yes. Sorry. Again, I'm Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover's mom, Taylor's mom, an amazing creature. I'm angry today. This was an orchestrated nightmare from my perch. That's what I see. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, chaotic nightmare, purposely orchestrated. The only question that I have is that why was the Taliban entrusted with my son's security? As you know, he had served twice before in Afghanistan, 2011. He fought these people. We fought these people for 20 years, and we're supposed to rely on them for the security of our men and women. Improper vetting. There was no vetting coming through the Taliban checkpoint. Hundreds upon hundreds of people came through without being searched. Who knows what came into our country? Who knows what came into other countries? The Taliban let the bomber through. The night of August 25th, 2021, I received my last text from my son. I said, "I'm safe, Mama, I love you." That same night, it was his men's last scheduled rotation of Abbey Gate. The gate was supposed to be closed. All through the night, they were taunted. The Taliban were in the crowd with the innocent. They recognized them because they had seen them on the tower earlier in the day. They were telling them they were going to kill them all night long, and then they would disappear into the shadows. Morning of August 26, 2021, on the bus from the gym where they were sleeping to Abbey Gate, a chaplain jumped on the bus with them and said, "We must have a prayer. There's a bomber in the crowd. We need protection." They knew a bomber was in the crowd. These brave men and women did their job, and they knew that there was imminent danger in their face. I don't want to hear lies. I don't want to hear excuses from Joe Biden, from the administration, from Blinken, Austin, Milley, Whited, Ball. I don't want to hear excuses. They knew this was going to happen, or it was part of their plan. They were too busy shaking hands with the Taliban, cleaning up, making sure we left it clean and tidy for the Taliban, to worry about giving our snipers the okay to make it all okay. I want justice. I know the justice that I crave will never be had in this life. I want them to stand on that wall. Hell, I'll even throw in the State Department to back them up. Let's see how they fare. I will settle for Leavenworth. I pray for the families of the Marines this last weekend that lost their lives. I pray that they're shown honor and respect they deserve. I pray for the families around this table that I have grown to love and respect and honor. The veterans in this crowd that I love and honor and respect. I pray for the families that aren't here today. I pray for my peace and my comfort. I pray for the strength to continue this fight. For my son, until my last breath, I will fight. Make me believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Darren, for that powerful testimony. Next, we have the family of Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Knaus, and represented by Paula Knaus self.
Good morning, especially to the Gabul 13 families that are around this table. I have grown to love them. It took me a while since we were the only Army, and they're all Marines almost. But I came around. Congressional members, you're making a difference. Every time you hear our voice, you're hearing the voices of thousands and thousands of veterans across this nation who are hurt by what has not been justice. And I tell the world out there watching, and the nation, our nation, the United States of America, we will not rest until we see justice. You have our word. My name is Paula Knaus Self. I am the mother of two grown boys. One, my oldest, Tyler Christian Knaus, and my youngest, who chose to be Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Knaus. And I'm very proud of those boys. In particular for Ryan, he was quite funny, a real comedian, honestly. He had a smile on his face all the time. He could light up a room, as his men and women would tell you in the forces. Ryan was also quite smart. Takes a smart man to be wanting to be in the military, because you have to be not just boots on the ground, but you have to use your head to stay quick and sharp. And he was a great influencer. You know, he always wanted to be cool growing up. But when I mentioned that to his brothers in arms the other day, they looked at me and said, Ryan was cool. We always wanted to be like Ryan, which is quite comical. He reached his goals in that also. He studied many great men and women over the years of his studies. And what he was trying to do was try to be the best leader he could be in whatever he was going to do in life. So I really believe Ryan found the answer for that in serving with the United States Armed Forces, in particular with the Army 82nd Airborne and with the Army Special Operations PSYOPs unit that he finished his service with. After serving his first tour in Afghanistan for 9 months as a new recruit for the 82nd, Ryan came back a little different. Not only had he been gone for 9 months as a new recruit, but he had seen things that he might not talk about for years to come, and he didn't talk about them initially. Then he became assigned to Special Operations 9th Battalion, and Ryan said he was in his element then because he was using his brawn with his brain. We were so proud of him. He volunteered for that second tour to go back to Afghanistan. Did you know that? He didn't have to go. I begged him not to go as his mama. I said, Ryan, stay. I'm getting ready to get married, and I want you to be there. He said, Mama, I've trained so hard. I'm ready to deploy at any time. And I said, son, be careful and come back home. So off he went, volunteering for the second deployment to Afghanistan for the non-combative evacuation operations in Kabul, Afghanistan, in the month of August of 2021. They only sent 12 of those special operations men and women. I guess they needed to help all those Marines. But unfortunately, we lost our handsome 23-year-old son, along with the many 20-year-olds that sit at this table, Taylor being the eldest at 31. Ryan has numerous awards and decorations. He was a go-getter. In fact, there's so many before he passed that he just shrugged his shoulders and said, I got another one. Here it is. He was a go-getter, but he also was humble. After his death, of course, he got numerous awards, but I can tell you this. I'd trade every medal, every award to have my son back. But he would go again if he knew, even now, the danger, because that's what a good soldier does. They face death, and they're willing to do that for our country. But it wasn't necessary to have lost him. We shouldn't have lost Ryan or any of these kids. And we call them kids. You know why? We just let them go. We just got them out of high school. They were becoming young men and women, and we watched them grow like that. But we shouldn't have lost any of them. We shouldn't have lost or had to go back for any United States citizens either. We shouldn't have had so many Afghan refugees clambering onto our planes by the wheel or any other way, or throwing their babies across a fence. That's not the way the military strategies are. There had to be something that was causing the chaos. Our men and women on the ground have order. Ryan trained and was ready. But what he wasn't ready for was the politics that came with it. There's 3 things that I would like to say today that I would like to see changed. Number 1, President Biden and his executive cabinet must accept responsibility publicly for the chaotic withdrawal at the end of the 20-year war. Several presidents preceded Mr. Biden in this 20-year war, but none of them are to be held accountable for the withdrawal. That is he and he alone. That is that burden. The second thing that we request is the question now bears on the executive and congressional branches how policies will be changed. No mother or father needs to sit at this table again with you and tell you that you failed in some way. Somebody did. Now let's find out who those people are and let them be held publicly accountable. And the third thing is, as we gear up as a nation for a new administration, my question to the GOP candidates will come as the following. How do you plan to protect America's borders and their interests, domestically and abroad? Do you plan to control the borders again, not allowing just anyone to pass through them? Finally, another question for the new GOP candidates coming. How will you hold your current administration accountable for the many eroding decisions that have plummeted our nation in chaos to its own citizens and in the eyes of the world? We must keep our status as a power in this world. Again, I want to thank each one of you that came today. And on behalf of Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Canals' family, we thank you so much for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you, Paul, for your moral courage. Next, we have the family of Hunter Lopez, represented by Alicia and Herman Lopez.
Good afternoon, Chairman McCaul, and everyone that's gathered here today. The days leading up to this meeting were preceded by some of the most difficult and dreaded days in my life that I faced. The days leading up to August 26 are full of apprehension, fear, and guilt. The days after August 26 are chock full of memories of what we were doing 2 years ago. The visits, phone calls, text messages of condolence, the feverish planning of a trip to Dover, the constant state of shock and disbelief. The only thing that keeps you going is the thought that if only I get myself and my family through this, everything will be okay. And Hunter will be waiting for us at the completion of this mission. Over the last several days, I was rereading the text messages that I exchanged with Hunter 2 years ago. I read how Hunter explained the desire to get to Kabul to help his fellow Marines and to help in the evacuation efforts. In those text messages, Hunter shared with me the things that he witnessed, things that we've mentioned here today. Infants being thrown over walls and fences, the disregard of human life, especially toward women and children, the lack of food, the lack of water, the sharing of their food and water that they had with those they were trying to help. He told me of the struggles they were having with having the proper equipment, having to hotwire vehicles just to get from one point in the airport to another. No matter what, they stayed strong and they pushed forward with the mission. As been said today, they took on the planning that others lacked to do. One of the things that Hunter mentioned that he found the most disturbing was having to work side by side with the Taliban and take direction from them or have things run by them first. Hunter had never been in a combat mission, but we all knew that the Taliban was our enemy. This is something that was foreign to Hunter and to all his Marines. Reading these messages always makes me proud of the work he was doing. However, the more time that passes and the more information that is revealed about the poor planning and on-the-fly adjustments, the accommodations given to some at the added risk of our sons and daughters, suddenly a feeling of anger and disappointment overwhelms me. As our country learns of the intelligence that was known and how it was disregarded by some, how care was given to the Taliban over the protection of U.S. citizens and the service members on the ground, and how more critically, how this threat could have been dealt with on a number of occasions is unforgivable. To add insult to injury, we find ourselves here in the nation's capital to fight for answers. Answers that you would think would come naturally to Gold Star families. Not only those of us present, but to all of those that came before us. You would assume that this information would come knowing that our lives, our families have been changed forever. We find ourselves reading sanitized letters from the White House on this anniversary of this tragic day. Letters seemingly authored to appease Gold Star families with an overall tone of indifference to not only Gold Star families, but to all the veterans who fought in Afghanistan and all who were injured during these 2 decades of war. A letter 2 years in the making, but a follow-up to silence in the 2 years since the bombing. In sharp contrast, we have our communities that have provided heartfelt vigils to honor the lives and service of our loved ones. They have supported us and recognized our life-changing event, something not done at the highest levels of our government. To our community, our friends, and family, we're eternally grateful. In closing, the process of getting to the complete truth has begun, but needs to continue. It needs to continue without divisiveness, without challenge. The Secretary of Defense, Austin, I recall meeting you in Dover 2 years ago. During that meeting, you told my family and I that if we ever needed anything, to call on you, and you would help us out. Well, I'm calling on you today. I'm calling on you today to release a complete investigation of the withdrawal from Afghanistan and for a complete account of the actions and inactions leading up to this attack on August 26, 2021. Information that will not only save lives of our current enlisted and military personnel, but will protect our country. It is owed to these families. It is owed to our country. General Milley, we weren't obviously expecting this note that we received at the beginning of this meeting, but in his note, General Milley mentions that he apologizes for any lack of information provided during these briefings that we all had in our homes. The issue is not the briefing. The issue is not the lack of information during those briefings. It is the disregard of intelligence. It is the disregard of planning. That's what you should be apologizing for. Chairman McCaul, Mr. Mast, Mr. Isa, and many others, we thank you for your efforts. We'll continue to be here and stand with you to get to the truth, and we thank you.
Thank you, Herman, and we stand with you.
Thank you.
Alicia?
My speech is going to be short. We've had several families already speak. And just in case the administration is watching, I would love to be able to mention all the service members that passed during the war in Afghanistan. However, that list is long. But I will mention the 13 that are pictured here. Marine Corps Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, 31 years old, of Salt Lake City, Utah. Marine Corps Sergeant Johanny Rosario, 25, of Lawrence, Massachusetts. Marine Corps Corporal Sergeant Nicole G., 23, of Sacramento, California. Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez, 22, of Indio, California. Marine Corps Corporal Dagan W. Page, 23, of Omaha, Nebraska. Marine Corps Corporal Humberto A. Sanchez, 22, of Logansport, Indiana. Marine Corps Lance Corporal David Espinoza, 20 years, of Rio Bravo, Texas. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared M. Schmidt, 20, of St. Charles, Missouri. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley J. McCollum, 20 years, of Jackson, Wyoming. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Dylan R. Marola, 20 years, of Rancho Cucamonga, California. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Kareem M. Nakui, 20, of Norco, California. Navy Hospital Corpsman Maxine W. Soviak, 22, of Berlin Heights, Ohio. Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Canals, 23, of Corrington, Tennessee. Please remember all their names.
Thank you, Alicia. We will remember them and we'll never forget. Next, we have the family of Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, represented by Cheryl Rex.
Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Rex. I'm the mother of Lance Corporal Dylan Marola. Thank you, Chairman McCaul, and everyone present today who have taken the time to meet with us. I am here today to discuss the failures that were allowed to happen by Joe Biden and his administration. Knowing the truths that have been revealed over time, the missed opportunities that were made at Abbey Gate, which ultimately allowed the deaths of our 13 service members, including my son. This administration has not only failed as Americans to provide truth and facts, but also have shown true evil as to lie and cover up their failures. This administration has been far from unsuccessful in anything it has or is currently doing. Those who seek to destroy within are the true enemies. Those who choose to believe divide is to conquer need to remember, as the United States of America, united we stand. Once you start a lie, that lie is covered by another lie, which ultimately turns into so many lies that you can't find your way out of the first lie that you told. The plan to withdraw that was already set in place, this plan wasn't implemented during the weeks of our American troops leaving Afghanistan. I've never been to Afghanistan, but it wouldn't be difficult to understand abandoning Bagram Air Force Base and the United States had controlled for over 20 years. Having a trauma center hospital that could have properly medically treated people in the event that they needed to use it. Dylan was on his first deployment to Jordan when the withdrawal from Afghanistan began. It quickly turned into the evacuation. Afghan allies and civilians, or of our Afghan allies and civilians, when he and his battalion were then redirected to assist in this process. My son was only 20 years old. Our service members as a whole were sent into a condition that was inadequate from the moment that they arrived. They put forth every possible effort to assist in saving as many lives as they possibly could. Not only have our 13 not been recognized for their heroism and sacrifice to our country, our wounded, and all those who dedicated their lives to protect others have also not been honored. It is my promise to all those who served that I ensure you will not be forgotten. The words written in our Pledge of Allegiance states, "One nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all." One nation, we are united as one. Under God, a nation that is protected and persevered by the Almighty God will be indivisible to all earthly powers. Justice for all. Justice means the commission of a crime, arrest by law enforcement, prosecution of a case in the trial courts, detention and supervision by corrections agencies. My son did not die because of your ethnicity, your religion, your political views, your left, your right, whatever you want to make your statement on. My son gave his life for what he believed in. He believed in the quality of life. He believed in love, respect, honor for all who came into his life. Saving lives means putting others before yourself. Division. Some cause division, and some create unity. Unity. You and I, together. It took a group, not just one. It will always take a whole to gain. I will continue my efforts for justice, as I feel this is the only way. The required action would prevent one from believing that they can misuse their power as to be held accountable for their actions. Some of these actions could also be easily spoken when those will tell their truths. I'm going to end this the same way I did in San Diego, Escondido with Isa. Behind every heart is a hero. Behind every hero is their story. Behind every story reveals what they have endured for you, for me, and for all mankind. Please continue to stand with me, myself, and my family, and the families of our 13, as we seek our answers to our questions on the failures that occurred on August 26, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we have the family of Lance Corporal Kareem Nikoi. Steve, his father, is here. And Steve, I want to thank you for the prayer before, because we all need prayers right now, and healing is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll segue into that too, and give honor and thanks to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ right now in the capital of the greatest country of the whole world, of the whole galaxy, of all the galaxies. On September 13th, 2021, the House on Foreign Affairs Committee held a hearing with the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And on September 29th, 2021, another hearing, this time with General Milley, General McKenzie, and Secretary of Defense Austin, which was not even a month after the attack that killed my son and 12 other service members. I never saw either of those hearings because in between both of them, I was burying Kareem. I watched them last week after I had watched the hearings from this year on July 27th, in which Colonel Crumrich, Colonel Colunda, and Colonel Sergeant Major Smith testified. Watching these, in the order that I did, gave me a great perspective. Not even a month after these attacks happened to our kids, the propaganda and the cover-up were set in motion by these two first hearings, in which two four-star generals, Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State testified. This was done because of the outrage by the American people on how the withdrawal was conducted, how America was portrayed around the world because of this withdrawal, and how our allies and our adversaries viewed us viewed us after this catastrophe. America was mad and we wanted answers. What was the mission? What was the objective? Why didn't we do the withdrawal from Bagram Air Base? Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin answered both of these questions by saying Bagram would take 5,000 people to operate and would put them in harm's way. What we now know from Colonel Sergeant Major Smith's testimony is that Bagram Air Base would take 2,000 people to operate. Secretary of Defense went on to say, quote, and it would have contributed little to the mission that we had been assigned, which was to protect and defend the embassy, which was some 30 miles away. And that distance from Kabul rendered Bagram with little value in the evacuation. So staying at Bagram, even for counterterrorism purposes, meant staying at war in Afghanistan. Something the president made clear he would not do, end quote. He associated the use of Bagram Air Base as a segue to staying at the war in Afghanistan. Colonel Sergeant Major stated Bagram was exponentially greater than that of HKIA. HKIA was a shared airfield. It was not completely controlled by the military. It has a significant weak points in its security. Bagram, on the other hand, had a completely secured airfield that would require a massive military presence in order to breach. General McKenzie went on to say, quote, the Bagram operation, or the Bagram option went away when we were ordered to reduce our presence to 650 personnel in Kabul, end quote. All of them recommended leaving a minimum of 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. In fact, Congress passed a law during the previous administration that troop level would not fall below 2,500. When the country saw the images of people falling off planes and the chaos ensuing in Kabul, they started to ask questions. Well, why weren't there enough troops over there to handle this catastrophe? The president went on Stephanopoulos early in August because the Taliban were videoing from our embassy and had taken over 80% of the country, and at this time, and was asked the same question. He lied and said, none of my generals ever told me that I should keep 2,500 troops. General McKenzie stated that he was in the room, as well as with General Miller, General Miley, and Secretary of Defense Austin, when they gave the President of the United States their recommendations and gaslit the President's course of action by saying, well, we can only give the recommendations, but it's up to the President to take those recommendations. I also thought it was a responsibility of generals to threaten to resign as a last measure of persuasion. They didn't do that. But they did do an excellent job of convincing the American people that the only way that we could have prevented the loss of 13 service members was to have extended our stay in Afghanistan. And that would have caused more deaths than just the 13. But the only reason why we had got to this point was because Biden administration had ignored Afghanistan in January, in February, in March, and in April realized that the deadline of May 1st was right around the corner. General Milley, at this time, was coercing with our adversaries on a media tour promoting himself and giving our secrets and protocols to the authors for their books. The administration had no other option but to try to renegotiate and extend the deadline, which they did, to September 11th. When they asked General McKenzie if the military was paying off the Taliban to go search for people or to do some crowd control, he replied no. But Tyler Vargas Andrews stated he witnessed that happening. When they asked McKenzie, did your guys have any opportunity to kill the suicide bomber before August 26th, he stated no. We now know that they were tracking him for up to 30 days before the incident, and even asked the Taliban to go where he was staying at and raid it, which they didn't. Upon the moment of attack, Tyler Andrews stated that he had watched the bomber from way back at the beginning of the line early in the morning, which have taken hours before he had reached his authorization point and continually asked for engagement authority, which he never got. 5 days prior, they had made a recommendation to have dispersion, and it was put up for 300 meters to protect them. Some leader on the ground the morning of the 26th had that dispersion collapsed. A total of 3 times we had the opportunity to take out this threat, and we didn't. And Tyler, a hero of ours, living the rest of his life, knowing that he had the opportunity in his sight to take out the man that took away one arm and one leg because he couldn't get the authority of engagement from his commander, Colonel Whitehead. I don't know a better test of character. Thank you for your service. Were there gunshots fired at our military? We all got letters, question and answers from the Marines telling us that if any service members say that they heard gunshots or seen gunshots, that they were disoriented from the blast and were confused on what they had perceived. But Tyler Vargas said that Christian Sanchez was shot through the shoulder and returned fire and killed that ISIS attacker. He said that David Traylor was also attacked, and I personally have talked to many of the Marines that were on the ground there that day, and they all say that they were being fired upon. We taught our children to honor the title, not the man, and we ask that this country, that this administration does the same. These kids need to be honored at the White House, in the Rose Garden, by this administration. Because denying their service and their sacrifice doesn't lessen or waive the mistakes made, but it divides us and weakens us on the world stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think these families do deserve to be honored at the White House and the Rose Garden. And the president needs to apologize for what happened and show remorse for the deaths of your children. With that, I want to recognize Brian Mast, who will read a statement of Shanna Chappelle.
This is the correspondence from the mother of Lance Corporal Kareem M. Nakui, killed in action, August 26, 2021. My son Kareem was the most amazing human being you could ever meet. His heart was so beautiful and he was so kind. He loved life so much and he lived it to the fullest. On August 26, 2021, my family's world changed forever. 3 Marines in dress uniform notified us that my son, Marine Lance Corporal Kareem M. Nakui, was killed at Abbey Gate during the chaotic and botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. That day still seems like yesterday, and every waking moment is filled with the pain that my son was murdered senselessly and unnecessarily. I want to honor my son's sacrifice by speaking honestly about what happened that day and what has happened since from a mother's heart. My son, my Kareem, was the most amazing human being you could ever meet. His heart was so beautiful, and he was so kind. He loved life so much, he lived it to the fullest. He loved our country and wanted to make a difference. He knew this was his calling since he was a child. He lived out his dream and became a United States Marine. On August 28, 2021, our family flew to Dover to bring Kareem home in a casket under this nation's great flag. On August 29, 2021, with only 4 hours of sleep since the day Kareem died, I met with the person who holds the position of the so-called Commander-in-Chief of the United States military. President Biden and his wife walked up to shake my hand, and I declined. I was clear to Biden that I didn't care to talk to him. I was there for my son. Then I changed my mind. I wanted him to know Kareem, my son. He was just 20. He would never have a chance to get married or have a family. He would have made an amazing daddy. I know this because he was so amazing with his niece and nephew. I wanted to show Biden the human being and the hero who lost his life serving next to his fellow Marines. Instead, he interrupted me twice to talk about his son, Beau, who died from cancer, saying he knew how I felt. He never thanked us for my son's service or told us he was sorry for our losses. On August 9, 2022, 3 weeks before the one-year mark for Kareem's death, my oldest son took his own life while grieving his little brother, Kareem. He wanted to be with Kareem, and the pain in his heart was too unbearable. This is called the ripple effect. My heart cannot find comfort or peace because I am grieving for two sons. For 2 years, I have tried to avoid watching the news, hearings, etc. Because every time I do, it feels like I'm being punched in the heart by this administration. My life will never be the same. I will never be who I was before my son was killed. I'm still trying to find out who I am and move forward with my life. And that's something that I struggle with every day because all I feel is pain in my heart. I miss my sons so much. They should still be here. What happened in Kabul was preventable, avoidable, and should never have happened. When you know you're guilty of doing something wrong, you don't talk about it, and if you get caught, you blame someone else. That's exactly what Biden has done for 2 years. He refuses to say our 13 fallen heroes' names and blames everyone else for his failures. I want accountability. Will it bring my sons back? No, it will not. But it will bring me some comfort, and I know my sons will look down on me and smile and be happy that finally something was done about their lives being lost. Keep in mind, there was a description of the bomber. How come the person who gave the description didn't take the bomber out right then and there?
We thank you, Shanna, for that powerful statement. Next, I'd like to recognize the family of Corporal Dagan Page, his father, Greg.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking this committee for allowing us to be here today to speak, and for the families of these 13 heroes that we have pictures of behind us, for everybody that's here, for all of our service members, all of our veterans, all of our wounded, all of our Gold Star families. Thank you all. My name is Greg Page. I'm the father of Dagan Page. Dagan was a corporal in the Marine Corps and was killed on August 26th at Abbey Gate. I'm going to talk about my son and what has happened since that day. I'm not able to go back beyond that and live in the what-ifs. As I'm sure you can understand, trying to play out all the things that could have kept my son alive is a dark place to go as a Gold Star parent. Something that has become obvious to me since then is that it has become forgotten that my son is more than just a Marine. He was a son, a brother, a boyfriend, a grandson, a cousin, an uncle. He was everyone's best friend. He was not just a number. So I thought it'd be appropriate to start by telling you about my son before his service. Dagan, or Day as we called him, was always an adventure seeker. Even as a toddler, he loved adrenaline, not just your normal excitement from going down a slide or getting swung around. He was always going a little further than that. He was always going full speed. This caused a lot of laughter in him and a lot of panic in us. As he got older, he kept his love of adrenaline and adventure. He began playing hockey and skateboarding when he was very young, and he dressed the part. Long hair, skater clothes, and always going 100 miles an hour. He didn't quit. He had no fear and was all about adventure, experience, and pushing himself. We now have a term for this. We call it living the day way. He proceeded to carry that attitude the rest of his life. He lived without fear. He didn't worry what people thought of him, and he was true to himself. In high school, he played defense for the West Side hockey team. They won the state championship his senior year. His teammates described him as a team player who pushed everyone to get better and pushed even harder when times were down. We heard the same thing many times throughout his life and through his military career, whether as boot camp instructors or his seniors in his battalion. As we have realized now, Dagan always found adventure that included brotherhood, to be a part of something bigger than himself, whether the Marines, hockey, Boy Scouts, or his circle of friends. I say all of this because he wasn't just the Marine that's on the news. He was our son. We ate turkey at Thanksgiving and watched football. We'd go out to dinner and go bowling. He liked to put ranch on everything. He liked to go hunting, sailing, and wakeboarding. He loved to hang out with his friends. He loved to golf. He would keep track of the speed on his skateboard by the radar that was by our house. We watched him play hockey and do things that most kids do as they grow up. He was my son. Needless to say, the knock on our door on August 26th turned our world upside down. To this day, I can't describe the emotion that I felt when I saw two Marines at our door in the shadows. You know why they're there when you see that. It's an emotion I hope to never experience again. We were thrown into a world that we never imagined, and I can't even begin to explain. After going through that and knowing that those killed and wounded were nothing short of heroes that day, imagine how all of those families feel when we see an administration, military leadership, and politicians' first response be, how can we spin this? How can we limit our damage? Or flat out ignore the events and the requests that come their way. Apathy, including those who don't show up to hear the family speak, is a slap in the face to families like mine. It shows that they don't see the human side of what happened that day. As a father, I often think, is there something I could have done in those 23 years to change this path and change what happened? As I mentioned, it's a dark place to go, as you can imagine. And being a father that has thoughts like this, and then hearing the leadership that had the ability to make changes say things like, I have no regrets in the way the withdrawal was handled, or I didn't see any chaos from my perch. I continue to see senior leaders literally turn their back and walk away from those who are trying to support the families and share the story of the events. Yes, that's really happened due to service members speaking about that day publicly. We've been lied to about what happened that day, as well as to what happened to our children. We have been lied to about our relationship with the Taliban, who, by the way, have done more to take out the leaders of this attack than our own leadership has. We have been hidden away to sweep this entire situation under the rug. Today, I ask this committee to remember this is not just a group of service members that were killed or wounded. They are loved family members and friends who deserve more. Get the truth, hold people accountable, and show respect to the affected families. There are a lot of physically and mentally wounded from that day that we owe it to make it sure that the truth is heard and acknowledged. Our family has started the Corporal Dagan Page Foundation to support our veterans community and turn a tragedy into good. But all of that starts with our country's leadership doing the same and recognizing that these are not just numbers, but loved ones. Thank you for your time. I ask for you all to find new ways to grow, make yourself a little uncomfortable in this process, and live the day way.
Next, we have the family of Corporal Humberto Sanchez. represented by Coral Brasino.
Good afternoon. My name is Coral Briseño, mother of Corporal Humberto Sanchez. First, I want to thank you guys again, the committee, for stand up for us and do what we cannot do. We can be here and testify, we can be here and talk about our kids, but there's things that we cannot accomplish without you. Thank you very much. And then I want to thank, this is my biggest probably, to Taylor. After March, he gave me the courage to be here. I wasn't planning on doing anything of this, but he's a brave man, and Bert was a brave man. I want to make them proud. Let's go. 26 years ago, I came to this country to give my little girl a better life, a life that with all my efforts, I will not be able to afford. 1 year later, I give birth to my handsome grade 9 boy. I raised those kids to love and respect this country, and foremost, to appreciate the opportunity to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. It was never, ever in my plans to lose my kid at the age of 22. Today, 2 years ago yesterday, we flew to Dover with my husband and only my oldest daughter to the dignified transfer. My son in a flag-draped casket, and 12 of his brothers and sisters. I will never get another hug or be able to tell him I love you. That day, to be honest with you, I was numb. I still cannot believe Bear was inside that plane. I truly want to run to his casket, open it, and kiss him. But instead, I have to hold my daughter, standing next to me. Her legs were giving out from underneath her, as she had just lost her best friend in life. I remember Alan and myself were holding her. The pain Abbey was feeling was unexplainable. Bert protected his old sister. They were barely close growing up. He loves her. She loves her little brother and wants him to be alive. And that moment, it's when I understand that I didn't have another option but to be strong. Even when my pain was probably worse than my daughter's, I still have to be a mom for my 3 kids and my granddaughter that she was only 1 year old. She was not gonna be able to raise that little girl. Somebody needs to step up. I learned how to smile during the day and cry at night when no one was looking. My wounds were healing slowly, just learning to live with the emptiness every day. I tried to live my life until this past March when this hearing started and I listened to Tyler testify and something clicked on me. I had stood in my grounds for over 18 months. I was not gonna get involved in anything politically. However, something never felt right in my heart. I am the type of person that likes to listen, not likes to talk and fight. I was being told too many things that didn't match, and the story did not add up. What had really happened? Was I even told the truth about my son's death? Wasn't. Something I learned about my son after he got killed, it was that he always stood for the people, and he stood and defend the ones getting bullied at school, the ones cannot defend themselves. He was the great defender. Who was going to defend my kid now? Who was going to defend the wounded? Who was gonna go to defend the ones serving along his side in Afghanistan? Bert was gone. I understand he was teaching me a lesson after his passing. I had to finish the work he was doing. He was helping women and children to have a better life here in the United States. And I remember going to Camp Abbey in Indiana, and I see all those kids with sandals and shorts, and the weather was gonna change really fast. So I went home, I started gathering clothes, shoes in the community, buying it with my own money. I just make sure that those kids have what they need to succeed in life in the United States. This past 2 years, I have been working on healing my own wounds. And to be honest, I really feel selfish because I am not the only one hurt and suffering. If we don't demand this administration to tell us the truth, if we don't get out of our comfort zone and overcome my grief to fight for our kids and their battle brothers and sisters, no one is gonna do it. Our kids deserve answers. We deserve to know the truth and why the government sent our kids to their death. Our wounded return and their futures now altered forever. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women fighting their own demons inside their heads, feeling guilty for not being able to help their brothers and sisters. We need closure as a parents. We need this administration to apologize for the awful decisions that lead to the death of our kids. Admit the mistakes they made. The name of our kids needs to be read aloud. And remember, and never be forgotten. 13 beautiful lives were lost on August 26, 2021.
Next, we have the family of parents of Jared Schmitz, Mark and Jacqueline.
Thank you, Chairman McCaul, and other members that are in attendance today. We really appreciate it. My name is Jacqueline Schmitz. I'm the stepmother to Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, who was killed just at the age of 20 on his first deployment to Kabul, Afghanistan, at the Abbey Gate. At the Abbey Gate bombing on August 26, 2021. I'm going to share a little bit about Jared first. I remember the day I first met Jared. A shy 6-year-old walked in to greet me with a white stuffed bunny. He never spoke a word that day, but when I thanked him, his smile melted my heart, and his shy eyes gleamed at me. And it's that smile, even in new or uncomfortable situations, that has warmed the hearts of so many people. And that's a smile now that we can only dream of. Through the years, Jared knew no stranger. He was an easygoing kid and embraced friends from all walks of life. He never had any judgment and always found commonality. Growing up, he had a stepbrother that was 1 year younger than him and 2 little sisters, all of which annoyed him regularly, I'm sure. It wasn't always peaceful or easy being the oldest in our home, but Jared knew just how to balance the scales of chaos. He did it without complaint and keenly knew just how and when he was needed. Even though the Marines was a perfect fit for Jared's personality, we challenged him about that reality. You know, this is not the call of duty. This is real life. But Jared was persistent and dedicated in his path since sophomore year of high school. He always saw the positive in everything and told us that this is exactly what he was meant to do. By this time, Jared had a different demeanor. It was as if his confidence took on a new form. Still childlike innocence, but that shy, timid Jared was nowhere to be seen. He had found his calling. Before he even turned 18, Jared enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps with the Parent Permission Program. But even prior to that, he trained religiously. Runs in the snow, workouts in 100-degree temperatures, and when he was done, he always smiled, that infectious smile. Barely an adult, Jared could not have been more excited to move on to the next steps of his life. The few, the proud, the Marines. In fact, Jared's favorite song was Hero of War, and it blasted nonstop for nearly a year before Jared was sworn in July 8th, 2019. Little did we know, this song would take on a whole new meaning when we got that knock at the door at 2:40 a.m. Jared, a hero that wanted to help people, and he looked to our military to make a difference. A hero that trained countless hours and weeks to be pulled into a messy and unnecessary evacuation, being called to handle government paperwork and stand guard to keep order as chaos continued to grow at the Abbey gate. Mark and I have met a few Afghan families that Jared had personally helped. And that leaves us beyond proud that he changed the lives of so many and died doing exactly what he intended, helping those that couldn't help themselves. But what I still struggle with most is how this was all avoidable and the continued lack of information, help, and accountability and justice from the government. I know from recent testimony that the suicide bomber had been identified for days, yet our men were ordered to stand down. I also find it very frustrating that since day one, our family was lied to. We were pitched a well-executed defense and evacuation, and ultimately spit in our face by referencing the evacuation as an extraordinary success. Is losing 13 of our servicemen and women successful? Is success ending a 20-year war where veterans feel they fought for nothing, they lost their brothers and sisters in arms for nothing? Is success hundreds of other people seriously wounded? As more information has unfolded from the frontline military, I now understand why the Pentagon sat in my dining room and tried to persuade us of details that at the time made no sense. They touted full medical treatment locations, scheduled timings of shifts, and the level of security measures taken with barriers of protection and the reasoning for the chosen Abbey gate. Our last call with Jared was that he was going on break and then heading out to the airstrip. That's not what happened at all. He never got that break and was actually pulled to the Abbey gate that was supposed to close hours prior. All our family ever wanted was answers, and nothing has ever added up. One piece of information would conflict with another, and ultimately there was never any physical evidence. I've never been one to follow politics much, but unfortunately when we lost Jared, we were thrust into a political situation, and I could see clearly that everyone had their own agenda. All we wanted were answers. We leaned on our local politicians that spoke outwardly on our behalf, but nothing ever came of it. Here we sit 2 years later. The general public recognizes the sacrifice and unnecessary loss we endured, yet Biden continues to play ignorant to our 13 as it stains his reputation. The military has values much like our Christian family, those of integrity, societal generosity, person of principle, belief in something bigger than yourself, being a leader, being valorous, taking responsibility for your actions, never forgetting those that were killed, and never, let rest those that killed them. As a grieving family, I repeat, we just want answers. Why is it that 2 years later we still don't have any information? In fact, more questions are being raised. Again, I'm not a political expert, but I only see much beyond this committee, that not both sides of our political parties are helping our 13 families. I don't understand what they are trying to protect, why some politicians are so afraid to dig into the Abbey Gate disaster. Why is it so hard to get answers from the president and top military leaders? After all, many of those leaders took the military oath and are missing the values I just mentioned earlier, especially being responsible for your actions and never let rest those that killed them. Don't you think it's time for answers? Jared, David, Nicole, Taylor, Ryan, Hunter, Riley, Dylan, Kareem, Johanny, Humberto, Max, and Deegan are not just casualties of war. They are sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, that were pawns in some agenda. And we deserve some information and collaboration from all political parties. It may not be easy or on your specific schedule or docket, but neither was any of this for all of us until it was. Our military was created to protect us, but leading up to August 26, 2021, they were not given that opportunity. The deck was stacked against them by agendas and decisions we still don't fully understand, and many of our politicians are leaving us to die of absolutely no closure, no information, and no accountability.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. You do deserve answers. And Mark?
Thank you, Chairman McCaul and other members of Congress who are respectful enough to be here today. My name is Mark Schmitz from Wentzville, Missouri. I'm the Gold Star father of Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, who was killed at the age of 20 at the Abbey Gate in Kabul, Afghanistan on August 26, 2021. I identify as a father, a husband, a pissed-off, fed-up American patriot, and now, thanks to this administration, a Gold Star dad, a title no one ever wants to have. From the age of 3, Jared has always dreamed of being a Marine. Once he made it into his sophomore year of high school, he was hard set on becoming a Marine, his next move after graduation. Little did he know, or I know, that would end up being his final major decision in his life. 2021 rolls around quickly. He says he's getting to come home to see us and his brothers and sisters because he's finally getting to go home on his first deployment to Jordan. I could see the excitement and nerves in his eyes, similar to when he left for boot camp. The unknown could always be a scary thing, but the thrill to see the world also drove the excitement. He felt like he was finally getting the chance to make a difference. He felt by becoming a Marine, he would make that difference a reality. To know Jared meant you knew he always looked out for the little guy. He was the type of young man who looked out for everyone, especially those not capable of looking out for themselves. While in Jordan, he trained with his fellow Marines as they honed their skills to perfection. He earned the right to shoot and train with a designated marksman, so I again reminded him of the opportunity that he could be a sniper someday. He says, "Nah, Dad, too much math." Little did we know at that time that a sniper of all people would be the first and biggest asset that we would meet later on, named Tyler Vargas Andrews. Thank you again, sir, for being here. Jared reached out to me in mid-August and said they were sending him somewhere he couldn't talk about. I knew it had to be Afghanistan. We followed the news back home about what was going on and knew that it had to be the place. Ever since Biden decided to ignore all reliable intelligence from his top advisors and close Bagram Air Force Base, in July 1st, 2021, which directly and immediately led to the Taliban's taking back most of Afghanistan that our warriors previous had fought so hard to control. We knew somehow Jared and his Marine brothers would end up there having to help clean up this mess that never should have been created in the first place. After landing in Afghanistan, a few days went by before I heard from him. When he finally had a chance to call, he told me he was at the Abbey gate. He said he thought he was going to die there those first couple of days due to the absolute chaos. He said, "Dad, the look on these people's faces was that of utter human desperation, and there's no way that we can save them all." He said he was exhausted and needed to get some rest before going back on the post. He told me they were shifting his post and he would be heading out on the airstrip. That never happened. The next day, the explosion happened. The next day, my son was gone forever. Fortunately, I was able to tell him I love him one last time. Jared would have made a wonderful husband, a father. He wanted to go into law enforcement after the Marine Corps, but changed his mind after seeing how our police have been being treated the first year of Biden's administration. He had mentioned taking over the family business someday, and that couldn't have made me happier. All these things have been stripped from us now, and none of them will happen. He will never have the sun shine on his face again. He will never have the chance to get married. He will never experience the joy of being a father, and he would have been one hell of a dad. We will never meet our grandkids. Our family name died that day. Two years has gone by, and where are we? To be frank, we're knee-deep in bullshit, is where we are. Everyone who held a key position in the military still has that position or has been promoted. John Kirby still sits on his perch, which apparently faces the opposite direction from where all the action was. Blinken continues to delay key evidence by delaying subpoenas. Not a single general slapped down their stars, which should have happened 2 years ago when Biden ignored his reliable intelligence. Not a single person has been held accountable. Our so-called leader can't seem to even utter their names in public, not even once. Mr. Biden has run his entire political campaign for 50 years as the family man. Well, I've got news for you, sir. The curtain has been lifting, and that campaign slogan will never work again. We have seen what's going on in your family, and even worse, we've seen how you've been treating us as Gold Star families. And there couldn't be anything more disgusting and cowardly than the way you have treated us. You are a disgrace to this nation. You have no business having ultimate command over our military, and I regret not saying that to your face when I had the opportunity in Dover. I felt it more important to bite my tongue, but I also had more important things on my mind at that time, like receiving my son's lifeless body stateside. While I stood there on the tarmac, watching you check your watch over and over again, all I wanted to do was shout out, "It's 2:30, asshole." But out of respect to the other grieving families, I bit my tongue once again. Well, as you could probably tell by now, I'm done biting my tongue. You, sir, stole their lives, their futures, their dreams, and have ripped apart 13 families. You cannot even man up and admit that. You, sir, gave us all the title Gold Star family. You, sir, discredit honor and integrity. 2 years later, there are things I find myself thinking about. Where and what was Biden's logic sneaking out of Bagram in the middle of the night before ever getting a single Afghan partner or American civilian out? This is the purest definition of intentional negligence. This is just one of many irresponsible and negligent decisions coming from the White House. In addition, leaving behind billions of dollars of our finest military hardware has led to the biggest international free market in history. Unfortunately, this will undoubtedly lead to more American military lives lost in the future. between what has been happening here domestically, for example, the border, over the last 2.5 years, and all your failed foreign policy decisions, I would venture a guess that you have more American blood on your hands, Mr. Biden, than any president in U.S. history. While in Florida, I was approached by a CIA operative who connected me with several more operatives on a secure phone call. I was told if the Pentagon, DOD, and state tries to tell you that they had no idea Afghanistan would collapse so fast after a withdrawal, they are completely and utterly full of shit. They kept telling me to follow Bagram, so I did, and so I have. Closing Bagram was the sole responsibility of Joe Biden. It was also the lead domino which led to the demise of all of Afghanistan. Its women, its children, 170 Afghans, 13 American servicemen, and for what? Intelligence given to Joe demonstrated Bagram, hands down, was the most effective and secure place to undertake a mass evacuation. But you chose to ignore all of that. Instead, you chose HKIA, a public airport surrounded by a chain-link fence in an urban environment without even a usable air traffic control tower. One thing I do know, though, Mr. President, China certainly is enjoying our fortress, known as Bagram now. I'm often asked what accountability looks like. Simply put, what is most important to me is that the history books are written accurately and honestly and truthfully about what happened to our fallen 13, the fall of Kabul, and for the truth to be told about those who failed to perform their duties should be identified and should be held appropriately accountable. Lastly, I have prepared a short list of answers I will not stop fighting for as a bare minimum for the unnecessary and avoidable sacrificial offering of our 13 brave children on August 26, 2021. I'm requesting that Chairman McCaul of the Foreign Affairs Committee subpoena the Inspectors General Office to review the complaints that were filed prior to the bombing of Abbey Gate and why those complaints went disregarded and who failed to follow up on them. I'm requesting an investigation of President Joe Biden, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken as it pertains to Article 3, Sections 2 and 3 of the United States Constitution for their involvement in intentionally leaving Bagram and all of its assets by knowingly aiding known terrorists, all while abandoning U.S. civilians and allied partners. I'm requesting Chairman McCaul to subpoena whoever has the stills and video footage from the Abbey Gate surveillance cameras, the sniper tower rifle scope SD cards, any drones that were flying that day, as well as all SD cards seized from cameras worn by our military on the ground that day at Abbey Gate, and any other surveillance equipment used, not already mentioned, so that the committee can see for themselves exactly what happened over there. And finally, answers to the questions from Tyler's entire testimony. Why did NCIS or FBI never interview him? He was easy to find at Walter Reed. How could you send Pentagon officials to Gold Star family living rooms to present your conclusive investigative reports? How could a thorough investigation possibly even exist when key witnesses to the events were never even interviewed, including not a single Afghan or the sniper who could have ended it all before it even started? How can it just be acceptable that our snipers cannot get an immediate and straight answer from their commanding officer at such a crucial moment? This bombing did not come out of thin air. We had intel. The bomber was in the area. Lieutenant Colonel Whitehead and generals on the ground were aware of this and did absolutely nothing to prepare our sniper teams, which relied on their leadership. In closing, Mr. Biden and Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken, if trusting and supporting our military is too difficult for you, then I suggest you pack your shit and enjoy your retirement, because from where I sit on my perch, the noose around your double-down notion that this was an extraordinary success looks like it's tightening a little bit more each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Let me say, as a former U.S. attorney, I will follow up on these requests that you've made, and I will not stop until we get answers. Let me just say thank you to all the family members. I know how difficult this is, and nothing we do or say here today will bring back your children, but we can get answers that they deserve, that you deserve, and the American people deserve. In my judgment, history will record this as a disaster of epic proportions. And probably the hardest thing is that it could have been prevented, as we heard from Tyler's testimony. It was so powerful. And we will get to Colonel Whitehead to find out why permission denied. Why was permission denied? Why was permission denied for an airstrike on ISIS-K that could have taken them out before this bombing occurred? You know, real leadership means when you make mistakes, you own it. You know, Harry Truman said the buck stops here. He didn't pass the buck. He said the buck stops here. True leaders own it, they take responsibility, and there's accountability. What I would like to ask all of you very briefly, while the nation is watching right now, and the Pentagon is watching, and the State Department, and the President, this administration is watching this right now. What is your message to the President of the United States? We'll start with Christy.
I would like to know why the red flags were ignored. The descent cables, the sniper requests, the air support requests. I think it's to have transparency in all of it is really important to me.
Good. Darren?
For me, I want them all to be grown men like our son was. Come forward, admit those mistakes, rectify the problem. We owe it to our sons and daughters that will come up through the military to know that their leadership has their back. This cannot and should not happen ever again.
Thank you. Kelly?
As my son, I want the president to do the next right thing. I want him to admit what he did, what he ignored. I want him to say their names, and I want this to never happen again.
Thank you. Paula?
I, too, want accountability from the executive office. I would also like to say that anyone that is running for office right now, make sure that they never make the same mistakes that this current office has made. Americans expect accountability, honesty, and to be able to trust our leaders to do exactly what they are told to do by the people. And that's what we expect on this next administration.
That's excellent. Herman?
I personally will pose a challenge to the president. I think our children, our sons and daughters, had more courage in their little fingers than this man has shown while he's been in office. So my challenge is tell the truth, all the truth to all of us, or get out of the way.
Alicia?
As mother to Hunter and mother to a current son who is serving in the Army, I request accountability, and I request for this not to happen again, because God forbid, without the planning and plans in place, that I receive another knock on my door for a mistake that they have already caused.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I would like all other evacuations of this type to be held from the Defense Department instead of the State Department and the White House. And I don't think we could change, to be honest with you, I think they had to do it again, they do it the exact same way. I don't think we've changed or we would change their chain of thoughts, but I would reiterate that, you know, they need to have 13 of these pictures in the Rose Garden at the White House and be honored by this administration, period. Thank you.
I agree. Greg?
Acknowledge what happened that day. We have a lot of mentally, physically wounded servicemen and women that need support that we're not getting because we haven't acknowledged that day. We need to acknowledge that. The second part is say their names. They've earned it.
Thank you. Coral?
I don't think a Gold Star parent needs to be sitting in the seat and ask for answers. Since the beginning, they should not lie to us. We deserve to know the truth and not ask for the truth. And I want to hear Biden saying our kids' names. And I always said our kids because they were our kids.
Yeah. Mark?
As Darren mentioned, I would love to see the president man up, admit this was a more political move on his part than it was military. This is not a game. It's cost our kids their lives. It changed 13 families and a nation of veterans forever. And if he's honest with himself and he feels he can't do this job, because we have active military in place right now that scares the crap out of me for those guys to be under this leadership. If he can't be a leader, step aside and let somebody else do it.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
Again, as I had mentioned, I would ask him to, accept accountability and help those other veterans that we are close to that are really struggling or who have already taken their lives because of what happened. We don't need any more of that. And he needs to own up and acknowledge exactly what happened.
Thank you. And I know the nation's watching. I know the administration's watching. And I know the president will hear your voices. And I hope that he does respond to each of you because you deserve it after everything you've been through over the past 2 years. So with that, I'd like to recognize Ms. Dean for her questions.
I think it's working. Yeah, thank you. In so many ways, I've been sitting here thinking, what in God's name can I possibly say to any of you? Your loss is unimaginable. You so generously say you don't want any other parent to go through this same hell. And we're here for that same purpose, I will say that. We want to learn. We want to understand. We want accountability. We want the facts and the truth. It's been pointed out that I'm a Democrat sitting here, but I'm not alone. Democrats want answers too. This was a grievous end to a 20-year war that represented so much pain and sacrifice for families. You think of it, some of your children and their kids, they're our kids too, 20 years old as the war, only 20 years old. So please, please know that in my heart, and I know I'm not alone, we know you deserve the truth. It's really at my core, in my job, I believe we all deserve the truth. I don't see this as a political game. I see this as life and death. And much more importantly, it is about service to country. What your children did, who they are and were, what they stood for and continue to stand for as we say their names over and over again, is the very best of us. I never served in the military. I'm in extraordinary awe of our veterans, of our Gold Star families, of those we've lost. So please, please know you are not alone in your search for the truth. Chairman McCaul, after our set of hearings, I have spoken with the administration directly about the truth and the gathering of the facts and making sure there is accountability for what happened, for the chaos at the end of this war, at the withdrawal at Abbey Gate, to better understand it for the very purpose that we never go through it again, but certainly to honor what you are here doing. So I have very little to ask because you've been so abundantly clear. But I guess I do want to reflect to you your losses, your extraordinary losses, in some cases 2 children, and what you bring to this table, sadly what you have to bring to every day, the strength to make sure we know your children's stories. I think it was you who said your son had taught you a lesson as you move forward in life. Your children are continuing to teach us all lessons. We honor their service. We are compassionate to you. And I say that not as a Democrat or as a politician or as a member of Congress, but as an American. We honor you. And I think in the little bit of time I have left, in each one of your sons and daughters, you talked about their drive, their absolute commitment to service, so that America better understands where does that come from in a young person. Maybe a couple of you might offer to me and to really those who are watching, where does that passion for service come from? Would anyone like to tell me about that?
I would like to come forward on that. We taught Ryan to make a difference. And from an hour old, he did a push-up. We knew he was going to be something. So all I can say is that Ryan fulfilled our family's wishes to finish well and to make a difference.
Thank you. Mark?
We raised Jared with morals and dignity, with the faith and belief in God. And he knew the difference between right and wrong. He understood the difference between David and Goliath. I guess he always kind of pictured himself as David, but what other place could you ever take that mentality and live it out to its fullest than the I was going to say Marine Corps, but military in general. So that's why he went that direction.
I know my time has expired. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak to the question of service? Coral?
I work really fast. I raise my son with values, and I teach him to love. And I think that he did it well until the last minute. And that's why he was that person, because he loves and he respects.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Malene. And I know that you and I can work together, regardless of party labels, to get answers for these families. And so Mr. Mast has graciously deferred his time, and now we will go to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike McCaul, for your leadership and having this meeting today with such wonderful people. And I want to thank the courageous parents and family members here. I'm grateful to be a fellow Afghanistan veteran parent myself. My son, Hunter Taylor Wilson, served for a year in Afghanistan as an engineer, and I'm just so grateful for his service. And we know that the American and allied troops have been successful in keeping Americans safe from terrorist attacks for 22 years. Your families will always be American heroes for the ongoing global war on terrorism. I also identify as a veteran myself of the South Carolina Army National Guard, 218th Brigade, led by General Bob Livingston. During their year-long deployment in Afghanistan, I visited 4 times to learn of their devotion to their Afghan brothers for freedom. Biden's shameful political decision ignored military advice. Mr. McCoy and Mr. Smith, you are right. Biden has no letters he falsely claimed. To the contrary, Biden's political decision is the worst military and foreign policy decision in American history, putting American families at risk worldwide. With this in mind, indeed, Mr. and Ms. Lopez, I too have a son named Hunter, so hey, we together. And I'm just so grateful for his service and what he's has meant to our country. With that in mind, what records and information does the administration have that you would like to see?
Well, I think overall, as far as records go, it would be as I mentioned earlier, the complete investigation. On a more personal note, there's some debate on whether some of Hunter's property was ever recovered. It was mentioned earlier that there's some SD cards and digital media that's perhaps missing from several families. And I've always been curious as to why those items weren't returned to us. I definitely understand national security. I definitely understand the need for intelligence. But once that has been accomplished, those are items that rightfully belong to each of us. So that'd be one thing.
To piggyback on that, we were told that none of his property was located or it was misplaced. Via Instagram messages and pictures posted by the Marines that were there, we found a picture of all our kids' flak vests laying on the ground, discarded and picked through. We found his kill patch months after the Marines had returned. A junior Marine had collected my son's kill patch, and it was given back to us months after he had been laid to rest. So for the military to tell us that their items were discarded or lost, I just can't explain how in the nation that claims to be the best, that they failed to collect our children's belongings, the last of what we have of them is lost.
And indeed, this should be bipartisan, working together for each family of anything that should be recovered. We're happy to all participate. And Mr. Hoover, this should be bipartisan, and I want to join with you. It's not political from my side. I asked 2 years ago for Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris to resign, and I knew at that time that meant that there would be a Democrat succession. And so it's not political. But sadly, we see he's still in office and the consequences worldwide of weakness by America. Additionally, I agree with Ms. Self that with the open southern borders, families are at greater risk today of an additional terrorist attack than ever in history. And the borders should be secured. And I know Mr. Smits too. The American people are at risk. Thank you for alerting us. God bless each of you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mike Waltz, he wanted me to relay his flight was delayed because of the hurricane in Florida, but he will be at our dinner this evening. And he served in the U.S. military with distinction. I next recognize Chris Smith.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for calling this important roundtable. I do want to thank Darrell Issa, too, for doing this a few weeks ago. I think a lot of us were moved almost to tears because I didn't hear all of it, but I saw some of it. But today, you have just touched all of our hearts in the most profound way, and the American people. So thank you for doing this. You know, words are inadequate to express our condolences. We all feel inadequate to say that because you have suffered so much. And the cover-up that has followed for the last 2 years just adds salt to the wound and makes it that much harder for you, I'm sure, to process this. So again, I apologize on behalf of our government, especially the executive branch, for it not being candid with you and for engaging what I consider to be a gross cover-up. You know, I saw the president's statement that he put out on the 26th, in which he said, we will always continue to support them, talking about you. You know, words are cheap in Washington, and it seems to me that these kinds of words, there needs to be an independent, comprehensive investigation. IGs do a good job sometimes. GAO does a good job most of the time, but there needs to be a truly independent investigation into all of the very valid questions you have asked and my colleagues have put forward with regards to our concerns as well. I think that the Biden, Blinken, Austin, and Milley ought to meet with you just like this, a roundtable discussion. No timetable. Don't let it say, oh, you got an hour, you got 45 minutes. As long as it takes for you to convey to them the horror that you have faced, and of course the horror that your loved ones endured because of this. Yes, we had a hearing. We heard from Tyler Vargas Andrews, Sergeant. Thank you for that. And we were all moved. He had clear line of sight, could have taken out the perpetrator of this horrible crime, and yet he could not get permission. So thank you, Sergeant, for that. And that is, you know, it just shows such a breakdown in the chain of command. So again, my final thought would be to all of you, an independent investigation, I think that has to be done. It has to be done well. Outside people, we can't turn to the Pentagon, which unfortunately has vested interests in perpetuating myths. We need to have honesty here, and we need outside people on perhaps even a blue ribbon commission to investigate this. High-level people who know how to ask hard questions. This committee will do it. You know, the chairman has clearly indicated that he's doing it. We're all behind him on that. But we need answers. We need it now. And for it not to happen again, hopefully, God willing, we do need a next steps. So this kind of charade and this kind of spin, Greg Page spin, it just ends. It's got to be the truth and nothing but the truth. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Ice is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman Dean, I want to thank you for being here. Your words and your presence says a lot toward the importance of what the families have to say here. Paula, I'm a fellow Army person, so please understand, in my 20-plus years of representing Camp Pendleton, a little bit of the Marine has fallen off of, me, and one of them, unfortunately, I'm going to show right now, which is from A Few Good Men. It said, we didn't join the Corps because we felt like we joined because it was a life, we didn't because it was a life decision. We wanted to live by a code. We live by, another quote, we live by a code, sir. Either we were right or we were wrong. We don't make deals. One of the challenges that we face every day now is that our country has begun making deals. And you hear it every day here. So one thing that I think is important for us all to understand today is we've got to stop making deals. I'm going to ask a question at the end of this quick statement. Cheryl, I want to let you know that I've been honored to, at the end of this all, to present you a flag. That flag was flown over the Capitol 2 years to the day on Saturday. That was an unusual day because at the behest of the Speaker, the flag of the Capitol was flying at half-mast in honor of all of your family members. That doesn't happen very often. It is truly a unique event to have that happen, and it did so because the Speaker knew the importance. So each of you will receive a flag flown that day over the Capitol, a day in which, in honor of your fallen, we flew at half-mast. Now, a lot has been said about what the president did or didn't do, and I think I'll just leave that where it's been well said. But I'm going to ask a question, which is a question I think that all of us will go away with, because your children, your siblings, for some in the back, they died for a cause they believed in. They died for a code they lived by. I'm going to ask just one question that's been bugging me. 2 years ago, had the Taliban become so strong we could not defeat them, had ISIS become so strong we could not contain them, and had Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram become people that we had to compromise and negotiate, or had we become so weak we could no longer defeat them? If the answer is yes, then there was a reason to leave Afghanistan the way we did. But we still stand with our allies in Europe against a threat from the East. We still stand in the Pacific against any aggression there. We still stand at the North-South Korean border with our colleagues in the Republican of Korea Army to prevent the kind of aggression that has occurred in the past. So I'd ask you, as people who have paid a sacrifice that we can only imagine in horror of losing a child, a loved one, should we quit standing because we are too weak or because the others are too strong? Or should we continue to stand up against aggression the way your loved ones did and paid the price for it?
We stand up for aggression.
We have to continue to stand up. We just need to do it better.
My family continues to stand.
Thank you for their service.
No, add to that, to answer your previous question, we're strong where it counts, where the boots on the ground. You know, there's a lot of, all these families signed up. They continue to sign up. There's a lot of young men and women out there that continue to sign up. Unfortunately, it looks like where we've become weak are some of the decision makers.
I concur with that also. And I also want to recant one statement I've made today. There was only 6 of us sent from the Army to help out those extra Marines. So,
it doesn't take but a few good men, Paula. Thank you. Thank you all for the answer that I knew I would get from the families who serve and whose children serve, and that is that they serve for a reason. They were raised to believe in this country. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Wagner.
I thank the chairman very much for bringing us together today, all of us together to commemorate, sadly, this, I can't believe it's been 2 years since this tragedy, this terrorist attack at Abbey Gate. And to each of the families here, as a proud Army mom of an Afghanistan veteran, I want you to know how much I thank you for your witness, for your courage, for your strength. You are a blessing to us. You are a blessing to this nation as we hear your stories, and we will continue to seek truth and accountability. Truth, answers, and accountability. To the Schmitz family, who live just outside of the 2nd District in the greater St. Louis area and from Wentzville, Missouri, and St. Charles. I know we've spoken before. Young Jared was only 20 years old, and if I understand the story right, he had to ask your permission at 17 to enlist early, just so that he could serve and fulfill that mission that he had grown into. Our prayers continue to be with you, and your anger, I think we are all emboldened by that and feel the same anger as you do as we seek answers and accountability here. I would submit to all of you, there was an article put out today, it's a new account, it's a reporter, a writer from The Atlantic. His name is Mr. Franklin Foyer, and it details President Biden's horrific failure in Afghanistan, and it confirms in just an excruciating and painful, heartbreaking detail what we knew from the very beginning, that President Biden's was committed the United States to just a deeply flawed and bad plan. And it was obvious from day one that this shameful flight from Afghanistan was going to be a disaster and a humanitarian tragedy. And in fact, it was. And what is amazing about this is that the president refused again and again and again to recognize the reality on the ground and fix his mistakes against the advice of many experts and advisors. It's hubris, complete and total incompetence and hubris. It was a dishonorable flight from Afghanistan and was a betrayal of our service members and the brave Afghans who lived and worked and fought alongside us, our allies. And the administration needs to own what they did. Again and again, we have directed the State Department in the strongest possible terms to cooperate with our investigation. I want you to know that. And I've been, as all my colleagues have been, to the State Department's woefully inadequate readouts and classified briefings, and I've read the overly redacted documents that they've grudgingly provided with disgust. They have done their best to hide the incompetence, but know this committee's not going to stand for it. We are not going to stand for this. We will not rest until this administration takes responsibility for its failure to see this mission through, to say your children's names. We will get that accountability. I'd just like, Mr. Chairman, to go around the room one more time and have each of you say your child's name in a word or two that describes who they are.
Sergeant McCaul Leanne G. was an encourager for life.
Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover, fearless leader and great protector.
My Taylor Hoover, champion of people, a lover of human.
Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Canals, brave, influencer, full of joy.
Hunter Lopez, United States Marine Corps Corporal, noble warrior.
Hunter Lopez, Jedi warrior.
Lance Corporal Dylan Ryan Marola, lovable, strong Marine, honorable.
Kareem M. Nakui, born-again Christian.
Degan William Tyler Page, huge heart, tough outer shell.
Corporal Humberto Bird Sanchez. He was a great defender.
Lance Corporal Jared M. Schmitz, compassionate warrior and honorable.
Jared Marcus Schmitz was humble and dedicated.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Our next member is a veteran of the Vietnam War, and I was reminded of the administration's comments that this will not be another Vietnam, that we will not see helicopters flying off the top of the embassy. And yet that's exactly what we saw, and I would submit it was worse. It was worse in Vietnam. But Mr. Baird.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member, I really appreciate having this opportunity for all of you to be here and share your very compelling stories. And Paula, for whatever it's worth, my background is the Army too, so and I only tell you that so these Marines can adjust to what I'm going to say. But anyway, I think the most important thing that I would like for you to know is that your sons and daughters are really appreciated. This country appreciates you. And even though you haven't had the kind of response you would like to have had from your government, I can tell you the American people appreciate it. And I think you should be very proud. And I can say this with integrity. I think you should be very proud of the sons and daughters that you've raised and that end up serving in the military. Because I had the opportunity to command them while I was in Vietnam. And our gun trucks, we ran with convoys. Our job was to protect that convoy. And whenever it was hit, we had to go try to protect our drivers. And never once did I see one of our members of the gun trucks hesitate. That's the kind of courage and the kind of young people that you raised. And so they fit very well with your concerns here. And I think the last thing I would just say is, by you being here, by you telling your compelling stories about your family, I think that makes us all stand up and take notice of what we might need to do or do better in future situations. And so I can tell you this, for those young people that I served with, I could call the ones of us that are left today, and they'd be here as quick as they could be here. And they were given an award. They were inducted into the Transportation Hall of Fame because of their courage and the work that they did. And so I take my hat off to them, and I take my hat off to all your families. And I want you to be very proud, and I want you to be very proud of the kind of young men and women that you raised. And I thank you for being here.
That's great. Our final member is a veteran of the United States Army, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Accountability. Transparency. Transparency. Accountability. Two words I keep hearing from every single person here. But we sit here 2 years later with not a single person having resigned, having been transparent, having been held accountable, even though we know that there was willful dereliction of duty. And you can call it what you'd like. Maybe it's a a vote of no confidence, maybe it is articles of impeachment, whatever it's deemed worthy. But I look at this at the highest level. You have the right to call yourself the Commander-in-Chief or the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of State, then the accountability stops at you. And not a single one has had the honor of standing up and saying, this was on me. I have an issue with that. And to answer former Ambassador Wagner, Representative Wagner's question of description of your sons and daughters, simple. It's a hero. I had the honor of serving in the United States Army as an Army combat veteran of the 82nd Airborne Division, where I know that Staff Sergeant Knaus had also served. And I can remember in my time of service, one of the things that we used to always look at was ensuring that we completed our missions and our objectives to the greatest extent possible. Now, I want to be clear on something by saying that. The failures that occurred in this Afghan botched withdrawal had everything to do with the suits and nothing to do with the boots. Our men and women carried out their missions, their objectives, their purpose with honor, with integrity, with courage. And they don't deserve to have the feeling as if all that they had fought and lost was for nothing. So to everyone who had served over the 20-plus years in Afghanistan or Iraq, your heroes and your service meant something. You know, when I asked Secretary Austin about what the definition of dereliction of duty is, he acknowledged my questioning. When I asked him if someone could be removed for dereliction or willful dereliction of duty, he acknowledged it, not realizing that I was talking about him. And I stand by my articles of impeachment that I've put forward against Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. And I do find that whether he found there was credible intel or not, and I'm utilizing his terminology where he talked about the identification of whether it was credible and actual intel, and whether or not it could have been prevented, we all know that it could have. I've seen the intel reports, how detailed they were up to the day, how they were planning the attack, how they were readying the attack, how they were entering the city, how the planning is now completed, how the attack is imminent. And then I looked at Secretary Blinken, who actually received something. The woman who was responsible for these descent cables had 16 years plus of time where she had been reviewing these cables. And I know that Ambassador Wagner had put her on the spot because she knows about these, having served as Secretary of State. And when we asked her whether or not there's been cables who's ever had 23 diplomats sign it, she said, never during my career have I seen that. The idea that this was political optics over military strategy is the reason that we have 13 Gold Star families sitting amongst us, and I'm honored to be here. I haven't been in Congress long, but one of the things that I pledged is that I would get accountability, answers, and transparency. I think that those descent cables, as well as for those intel reports, should be declassified for the families and for the American people so we can get one of those two words, which is transparency. And Tyler, let me just tell you, you're a hero, and I'm honored to call you a brother. I'm grateful that you're here today. Your testimony is one of the strongest, and I was nearly looking like I was cutting onions because you had me tearing up so bad on that one. There should have been clear escalations of force and rules of engagements that were set forth so that you could have carried out your job and have identified the bolo and stopped this from happening. And not even during the State of the Union did President Biden once acknowledge your children or acknowledge the failures. But I won't stop fighting whether it's to change policy whereby families do not have to come out of money first and be reimbursed, or have nonprofits step in to replace and get them to where they need to be for their final resting, as they did with McCaul, or whether it be for making sure that those who are responsible hold their hand up and try and be a dignified and honorable individual to acknowledge what happened so it doesn't happen again. I thank Chairman McCaul. I thank my brother Brian Mast. I thank Ms. Dean for being here and for acknowledging the sacrifices so that we can not just look at this from a partisan perspective, but so that we can get accountability that guarantees that we don't see this again, whether it be in Iraq, whether it be in Syria, or any other future operations. But I'll tell you, the most successful and victorious battle is the one that we don't get ourselves into to begin with. We have to start prioritizing our nation, our people, our borders, and make that our priority, and not the borders and the lives 9,000 miles away. Our American lives must come first, and I'm honored to be here, and thank you so much for everything that you did. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Corey. Let me just say in closing that we are behind you, and the nation is behind you. And we will seek justice, and we will hold those accountable for you, but most importantly for your children. They deserve that. And every veteran who served in Afghanistan deserves that. So at this time, we will have a flag presentation of a flag flown over the United States Capitol in honor of your child. They were flown on the second anniversary of the terror attack at Abbey. May we never forget them and their sacrifice. So I would ask that each family rise and stand beside the photo of your loved one, and the members here will present a flag to each of the families.
That's right.